All right, so this is a view that I've been wanting to talk about because a lot of times people bring up the 90s and act like it's the best time period ever and everything's perfect and blah, blah, blah. Me personally, having grown up in the 90s, like, I can understand why. Like, I'm, might be uploading this when I'm 43, uh, currently recording this at 42. Yeah, not that long until I'm 43. Um, but yeah, like, a lot of my childhood was in the 80s and the 90s. And in some ways, I can understand how people can say 90s was better, such as when CDs were coming out. The music that was coming off of CDs were definitely better in the 90s uh, than a lot of like 10 years ago and whatnot. But that's because of a change in audio format. Um, Basically, you have like the raw, sometimes uncompressed files and put onto a music CD, and not every device could actually play the audio back, or at least play it back cleanly. I do remember that. But yeah, like once MP3 became a thing, it was really weird. I mean, granted, currently we have like what's called lossless audio, so they got to compress it without losing too much of like the overtones and stuff like that. But yeah, other than that, 90s was an interesting year. Like, things were not better, but it wasn't worse either. Or rather, things weren't worse, but weren't. Either way, the thing that I find most interesting how many people have such rose tinted glasses when it comes to the 90s. And being someone who actually been in like one of the neighborhoods where you'll have the children and teens asking each other, because of people becoming such stands over their music. I've seen a girl spit at another girl over, I forget if it was over Corn or Blink 182. I don't remember, but yeah, something like that happened. Seen people have fist fights over the whole thing of because of the whole Biggie versus Tupac thing. Um, so yeah, there were some people who were absolute stands. They're like, "Are you East Coast or are you West Coast?" Things like that that happen. And and it's fun. Like, a lot of people like to act as though like gaming was a big thing back then. No, video games were not a big thing back then. I mean, yes, when CD came about, it became bigger. It got bigger graphics, and then the normies would jump into gaming and whatnot. And I know some people may look at like how the Wizard existed. It's like, yeah, the Wizard existed, but that's because, but like it wasn't the big thing that everyone was talking about. There was maybe a few people in school, but that's about it. Um, Granted, there was a whole Pokemon boom, but you got to remember that wasn't just the video games. That also came with anime, and that also came with card games. And and physical trading products were a big thing. We did briefly have Pogs at that era, which were these cardboard discs and this metal or plastic larger disc where you stack the Pogs up, you hit the stack, and whatever Pogs and whatnot fell off, you collect them. It was almost kind of like a gamble thing in a sense, if you want to think about it like that. Um, which is why you see more people collecting than actually playing the game. Or if they were to play the game, it would be Pogs that they have no problem losing. So it's like, okay, put my stack here, and then put the stack. You hit it, and then you collect. It was basically gambling in a sense. So it's kind of a good thing, I would say, that Pogs fell out of fashion. Yeah, I'm sure there were some people who just collect didn't know that. Yeah, there was a game to it, and and some people were really serious about their pogs, but not as serious when trading card games came about because, yeah, I mean, everyone seems to have a story about people fighting over a Charizard card. That was a thing that happened, and I've seen that happen myself. So yeah, and I think if it wasn't for the trading card game, and if it wasn't for the trading card game or the anime, Pokemon would not be as big as it was. And even then, anime was not as big as people thought that. Because, yeah, we did have Dragon Ball, but even then, we had anime coming to the States. I live in the United States, and we did have anime come beforehand. Matter of fact, my very first anime, when it came to the States, they called it Noozles, but it's actually the Wondrous Koala Blinky, which was really weird because you had this magical koala that talks, but he would turn into a stuffed bear. But whenever, what was the name of the protagonist? Sally? I don't remember. It's been a way long time since I watched it. My first anime. But yeah, she would do this little noozle, and then the doll comes alive. At first, the doll's freaked out because the koala and his sister came from this place full of magical koalas called Koala Land, I think. But the thing is, the reason why Blinky was a bit freaked, I'm pretty sure it was Blinky. Like, someone may correct me on that, but had said he was freaked out because the girl's not a koala. And the thing is, the inhabitants were very xenophobic. So yeah, that was one thing I remember. First time seeing prejudice in media. I think I was 3 at the time. I don't remember. But yeah, that's 80s. And then once Dragon Ball came about, Dragon Ball Z, they started putting metal to it and other hard rock, and that got people excited. That was within the Saturday morning time slot. Although they did, censorship was notorious back then, where instead of people dying, they're put into a different dimension, or how with the whole, instead of hell, it's realm of infinite losers, and even the whole part with Gohan meeting a robot in his childhood, that was completely cut out for some reason. Unfortunately, there were the Spanish channels, so I got to watch the anime some on the Spanish channels as well. I should know I grew up in a lot of Spanish neighborhoods, and yet my Spanish is absolute garbage. Basura, you would scream if you heard me try to speak Spanish. But yeah, even then, it wasn't really that super big. It was just Dragon Ball and Sailor Moon, and that was it. And then Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh came out, and that became for the 90s, that was the big four. Not a lot of people watched Gundam. Not a lot of people were aware of Samurai Pizza Cats. Not a lot of people have seen what was that other one that was supposed to be male Sailor Moon, what was it, Ronin Warriors or something like that. I don't remember that one. That one, even as a boy watching that, Sailor Moon was way more interesting than Ronin Warriors. So, which is probably why you have even a large male demographic who enjoyed Sailor Moon. The fact that, but then again, maybe there was something to Ronin Warrior that my young mind didn't really care for. It wasn't like Saint Seiya, which in the United States got called Knights of the Zodiac. And then we didn't really have much. Even when Gundam was big, we didn't have Zoids. I think was years later. But okay, I'm getting off topic though, because it's supposed to be about the 90s, and yeah, you have those who knew the anime that was coming out, and then you have those who just didn't care, and didn't really jump on until, like I said, when Pokemon got really big. And of course, because everyone already familiar with Sailor Moon and Dragon Ball, so once Pokemon came out, it's okay, here's the next thing. and then people find out, oh, there's a game to this, and there's trading card games. And like I was saying when I talked about the Pog story, people were into that. If it wasn't Pog, it was something else. And then once, and there weren't a lot of stores that sold Magic the Gathering. There was like one newsstand store thing. I don't know what you want to call it. That was near where I lived at. This little corner store that was like the only one in the area that sold Magic the Gathering cards. So that really didn't get that big where I lived, but well, where I grew up, I should be saying. But yeah, once Pokemon came out, like it was a big thing. But of course, people got more in. Well, the kids got into it way more than they did with Pogs, which is like I said, the whole Charizard thing. So yeah, like, and it's funny because like the thing that made me want to jump into this was the whole talk of monoculture and people talking about how things were united and things were common. It's like no, because I mean, with me talking about it, like people grew up at that time. Of course, their first anime is going to be Dragon Ball or Sailor Moon, and those who've been watching anime earlier, like myself, would have watched something like The Wondrous Koala Blinky or I don't know if Doraemon ever aired at that time on U.S. shores, but Doraemon may have been one. I know there were also some that were into Mobile Suit Gundam as well, and Robotech. I think Voltron was another one. I knew someone who had the toys. Never did see the series, but yeah, like we didn't have this grand whole everyone came together and whatnot. And then there's of course the whole music thing. Because not just you had like the rap and whatnot, you and the and stuff like that. Like there was also the whole thing with grunge. Like grunge is a very '90s thing. It was definitely the kind of music you could say defined the era. But at the same time, if you were to ask people about that music, what music they grew up with, not everyone's going to be saying how they grew up with Nirvana or I don't know who else that would be well known amongst the people. But yeah, some would probably favor someone like Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera, NSYNC, Backstreet Boys. Um, some might remember Together. I don't know. Uh, yeah. I know my calculus means 2 plus you plus me equal us, or something like that. I don't remember. But yeah, it was definitely a wild time. I think one of the better parts of the '90s was that there was so much variety out there. Of course, some people would say that maybe because they didn't have algorithms back then, but I think that's stupid because television programming and radio programming was our algorithm at that time. Which was also why cassettes, vinyls, and CDs were so important to purchase. The fact that you would get something that you could listen to on your own time rather than waiting for something to be fed to you. you know, and and of course there were those who instead of actually do anything, they would just sit down and just scroll through TV. Like, why doom scroll when you could just channel surf? People tried to make the television equivalent of doom scrolling sound fancy by calling it channel surfing, but really it's just you're just sitting there and wasting time. And it was also when TV started to have its downfall. Yeah, '90s was an interesting time. That was when like entertainment tried to appeal to everyone, but eventually failed and in a lot of ways appealed to no one. Granted, some people disagree, say like how Jerry Springer was big, but then not everyone's seen Jerry Springer either, not until years later. And the same goes with Jerry Seinfeld. If you didn't watch Seinfeld, you watched Home Improvement. If you didn't watch Home Improvement, you watched Roseanne. Or though some people refer to it as the Conners. Yeah. 90s were not this big utopia that people thought. And that's basically the point of this video. So with all that said, I am Neko AB, and I thank you for watching.